Welcome to Viseland. We are here. We got another top 10. What are we going to be talking about today?
You left out the Mikey, but we are going to be talking about 10 of the best players of all time to have never won a championship ring.
And that is a pretty illustrious list.
Yeah, it actually, the thing you realize is not everybody ends up winning a championship. It's tough. Sometimes it's the wrong era. Let's face it, one team wins a championship every year. So there are going to be guys who end their career without winning a ring. And in this case, you'll see that there are some great names on the list.
Let's check it out. Let's start with number 10. Who do we got?
We're going right into it then.
Yeah. First of all, I want to see, like everyone wants to see. It's intriguing.
Yeah. Well, the thing that we should state, Jason, is that what we decided to do here is only include players whose career is complete. So we figured that James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Giannis, many other players,
even Chris Paul to throw it out
Damian
there.
Lillard, Chris Paul, they could win one on the way out. Like, for instance, when we were going over the initial list, somebody put Gary Payton.
I thought it was Gary. I put Gary Payton because I didn't. This was my preliminary off the top of the dome list. I put Gary Payton, but I forgot.
You forgot about Miami.
And if you're a Gary Payton fan, you know about Miami. But if you're not you might have forgotten it because it was pretty whatever.
Gary Payton, yeah, Miami, and then he was yeah. So just Miami.
Because obviously he didn't get it with the Lakers in 2004. That didn't work out.
And then he did not happen.
He was chasing around. Didn't he end up on Boston for a hot minute too? So
he was in Boston. He was in Boston right before they got super good.
Yeah, but he was
Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce.
But dude, guys go chasing. So that one slipped through the cracks, and that's why we research, we vet these things out before we bring it to all of you.
He was a good bench player, that Gary Payton. But yeah, so we'll start at 10, and we'll work our way up. So these are just players that we feel had the best career. Let's face it, if you go on the ESPN at 74 rankings, our list is going to be pretty similar to that. But at the same time, you won't necessarily know off the top of your head who won championships or not. I think I had a pretty good idea just going through that. And then we made a slight change here or there. And we'll start at 10 with Tracy McGrady.
T-Mac. He was a guy that, he had a hard enough time making it out of the first round of the playoffs, but he did have that 1 year where he was on San Antonio.
Yeah, they were really close that year. And he barely played.
Yeah, totally.
He played 31 minutes in the playoffs in 6 games. 7 assists, 8 rebounds, no points.
Which for Tracy McGrady,
7 from the field.
Yeah, for Tracy McGrady is super sad. But yeah, he was a guy that, again, in Toronto, they were just, when he was in Toronto, they were just getting that playoff motion going. He goes to Orlando. They're pretty dreadful. Houston.
So, 3 years in a row, Tracy McGrady had a 7-game series. And lost in Game 7 every time.
Yeah, in the first round too.
That was first round.
That was kind of his thing.
Well, technically, while he was playing for Houston and playing for Orlando, they never went. And this is when he was playing. They never got out of the first round.
Yeah. And it's
and then when he was on San Antonio, that was when they almost won him that ring. On the way out,
he was a great scorer, and it seems so blasphemous.
They lost in 7 to Miami.
It seems so blasphemous now, and T-Mac's a great player, obviously Hall of Famer. But people were putting him, Kobe or T-Mac. Who are we? But it was now it seems insane that anyone would say that. But at the mid 2000,
they just don't know the context if it seems insane. But there were serious discussions about it. Tracy obviously didn't play on the same level of team as Kobe Bryant, but he was tremendously talented. He was just kind of like he had this ability to score that was incredibly rare. Was a fantastic passer as well. Very good defender.
No, totally.
And
He'd get up there on the shot blocks. Like he was.
Oh yeah. He was a really good shot blocking wing, and the fact he could be your like primary initiator as well.
Yeah.
And I just want to go down during his time in Orlando to Houston. Before that last year, where he goes to New York. So over a 9-year stretch, plays 592 games, averages 25.6 points per game, 5.4 assists per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, and has 2 years where he leads the league in scoring.
Yeah.
The early Orlando Tracy McGrady was absolutely ridiculous. Like, just a great player.
But the team was so terrible, and then there's that one year he gets hurt.
Well, and the other thing was he initially felt, or the thought process was that he was going to team up with Grant Hill, who was, an MVP candidate in his own right. He gets to Orlando and gets injured. So they could have had like 2 super high level wings. Grant Hill himself being a tremendous
player. And Duncan was a free agent that year too. Like, I mean, there was thoughts that Orlando had all the money and they were going to get 2 guys.
Yeah, just didn't work out.
For T-Mac, I think, like, again, like when he looks back on his career, it's like I wish that Raptors team could have stuck together if he
talked about it a few years ago. He said that was kind of a regret for him.
But I get it. He wanted to go back to his
cousins. The cousins, yeah.
They wanted to go back home.
A lot of fun, man.
And
Vince, like that last year they played together, they were a really good time. And then you could kind of see near the end of that season that Tracy was like, there was at least some conversation. Tracy had said that he felt like he was the Scottie Pippen to Vince Carter's Michael Jordan. And I think that was more level of excitement than actual level of play. And I think if you were to rank their careers, you would certainly have Scottie Pippen higher than either of them. But in terms of peak, Tracy McGrady was, I would say, like,
he's a bad man out there.
Ridiculously high level.
Yeah, he's someone that you'd want out there. So it's tough. But yeah, again, just like never had that luck in the playoffs, like, period. So that's kind of
and that keeps him down the list. Injuries. He only played 50 playoff games.
Yeah,
that's kind of a shocking statistic.
For someone who was consistently, considered like, starting in All-Star games, kind of that kind of level, pretty, a little sad.
Yeah, and like in some of those series, you were just like, what more could he do?
Totally, and that's why, like, a lot of those teams where he was carrying those teams. So it's just that's the way it happens sometimes. So.
Mm-hmm.
But we got nothing but love for T-Mac. But yeah, I wish he could have stuck it out in Toronto. That would have been super.
So our next choice, coming in at number 9, he was seen as the preeminent shooter of his era, one of the best shooters in NBA history, a guy who just was like, in terms of like offensive rating and analytics, was like really far ahead of a number of other players. And there are a few things about him that are kind of surprising, but at number 9, we have Reggie Miller. And Reggie was the all-time leading 3-point field goal champion before Ray Allen broke his record. Is it Steph already, or like it's soon to be
Steph, like they do more in a season now than like guys were doing in their careers, like, because Dale Ellis used to have the record like years ago, and like Steph does more than that in a year.
Yeah. Where are the 3-point field goal? I just wanted to see.
Let's check it out. But yeah,
okay, so Reggie's still ahead of Steph right now.
Okay.
And Ray is well ahead of everybody. Ray's almost at 3,000. He's 2,973. But Reggie certainly took a high number of 3-pointers given the time. But if you were to look now and go by the standards nowadays, you would think he would certainly be taking at least like 8 to 10 per game, if not more. Always was at a
He's one of those
really
guys
solid
you
clip as
kind of
well.
want like a GPS tracker on too, because he ran so much off the ball, off
Yeah,
pick, something like that to get open. It's like
that was the big thing with him. He could shoot in so many varieties, but he was so deadly off of screens.
yeah, like he was always just running the floor. Like the only other guy I can compare like that had that like for a while was like Rip Hamilton for a few years. Like in Detroit was just, and that's why they were such a good matchup at the two. But yeah, Reggie was just again like such a clutch performer in so many games.
You know my theory is that the guys who are clutch are usually the guys who shoot the best.
Yeah, no, totally. It helps that he's generally the best shooter 99% of the time on the court. And he's the guy, you look at his career too, he did shove Michael Jordan.
Did indeed.
That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Man, that was like one of the hardcore down to the wire series he had. He lost some game sevens as well.
No, he lost some tough playoff. I remember there was one playoff series towards the end in Indiana. I think maybe when New Jersey was on the come up, and he was like he dunked at the end of the game, like, and that was like something you never saw like early in his career. And this is like when the point where like
Tayshaun Prince had that chase down on him.
Yeah, that did happen, but I mean again
that happened.
Hey, Alonzo Mourning said this about shot blocking. When you protect the rim, sometimes you're going to get dunked on. When you stay aggressive on offense, sometimes you're going to get blocked.
When you go up like an absolute wuss, you're going to get blocked, and that's what Reggie did.
Yeah, but he was never someone that like went up.
Tayshaun, boom!
He was never someone that went up super strong, but he did. They made that 2000 finals, but of course, like that's against that first of the Lakers three-peat there, so like no chance. And he went toe to toe with Michael Jordan. I mean, his real window that he missed out on was basically those years where Michael Jordan was playing baseball. Because they had that tough series against Orlando in '95. Yeah. I remember that was a lot of back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And then the one thing I wanted to mention about Reggie, makes his first All-Star game in 1989-90, where I believe he averaged a career high 24.6 points per game. 4 more years until he makes another All-Star team, makes a couple in a row. He made 5 for his career, which seems low. Like you would have thought Reggie Miller would have
thinking about it, yeah.
But with his high volume of 3-point shooting, he chalks in at some absurd offensive ratings. And he was just a guy who they relied so heavily upon for offense and built like that really rugged defensive team around. And there were a number of seasons where they were really in the thick of things, make the finals against the Lakers in 1999-2000. It was a closer finals than I think people remember. And one game where I think, Shaq got in foul trouble or fouled out, and like Kobe kind of had to save the day. But yeah, they take the Lakers to 6 that year. And we had mentioned that if we felt if the Blazers had made the finals, they probably would have beaten Indiana. Indiana certainly was a very good team that year.
Indiana wasn't a slouch. I mean, they were pretty they were one of those teams too, because like Chris Mullin was there at the time. Like they were a pretty deep team. They kind of had a nice group of dudes around Reggie, obviously being that guy. And again, I mean, you think of him, you think of Madison Square Garden. I mean, against the Knicks.
Yeah, Spike Lee. I read his book. And now I find him nearly intolerable as an announcer, but that's just my opinion.
No, but that's a separate thing. And like also like
he was a fantastic player. He was one of the better shooting guards of the time when Michael Jordan was in the league, and certainly was at least a matchup for him. Like they at least kept it closer than most people did.
Yeah,
Michael Jordan was well ahead of everybody else. It seems like every other wing during that era. But yeah, Reggie at least kept it a little closer, gave him a few tough series. And
gave him the shove off. I mean, that's not something like,
yeah,
obviously Michael Jordan makes you pay for it in the end, but it's you get the better of him for like, you can say that for 5 minutes,
that was
or,
crazy.
for a
The
day.
8 points in 8 seconds too. That was,
Yeah.
I still remember watching that and him pushing down Greg Anthony and the whole deal.
And you know what? He was one
John
of the
Starks
best.
missing the free throws.
Yeah.
Like everybody thought that game was over. They were already talking about like, oh yeah, like the Knicks are up. And yeah, they're one. And no, Reggie, Reggie did some amazing things, and went to UCLA. The one thing that I kind of remember hearing rumors about was near the end of his career that he was thinking of going to LA, and that never ended up happening. But yeah, he was thinking of trying to win one on the way out with Shaq and Kobe, and certainly would have been interesting. But no, he kept it true to Indiana.
Yeah, I think I respect that more about him.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
like doing it, working it.
Would you have respected a championship ring from Reggie Miller?
No, I think he was kind of the, he
not what
kind
you're
of
working
played the
on now?
role. He kind of played the role of the villain anyway. Like that was kind of his.
He would have been the villain if he won a championship.
No, totally. But yeah, I think it gives him more mystique in not winning. But he got mentioned on Seinfeld. He guest starred on Hanging with Mr. Cooper. He's
Oh yeah, well he's Cheryl's brother.
Yeah, and now he talks on TNT a lot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So let's go on to number 8. And number 8 on our list was somebody that we mentioned as a possible MVP candidate during the 1977-78 season, known as the Iceman and a prolific scorer for the San Antonio Spurs, George Gervin. And I think George Gervin's ability just to like be the offense.
Yeah, he
like
was. I mean, that's why he's the Iceman. He was a cold scorer. Actually,
yeah.
I actually went to like years ago when I was at a camp. One of the counselors there was actually George Gervin's high school coach, and would talk about how George Gervin didn't really have like what he considered like traditionally good shooting form, but it always went in. So he'd basically say like, when I did practice, everyone would be at one end of the court and George would just be at his own. I'd let him do whatever the hell he wanted, and then I'd try to coach everyone else because like George would just go out and get buckets. Like you didn't have to worry about that.
Still shot. So over his time playing with San Antonio in the NBA, he plays his last year with Chicago. He's actually on the same team as Michael Jordan.
Yeah, but I mean, that was too early Michael Jordan, too late George Gervin. Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
Times didn't.
Well, it was his last year.
Yeah.
He was 33 years old. And I'm guessing by then most players probably didn't have the same treatment that we have now. And George Gervin goes during from 1977 to 1985 with San Antonio, averages 27.3 points per game, 2.9 assists per game, and 4.8 rebounds on 51.4% from the field.
Yeah.
Like that's really good. The 3-point shot, of course, not being a big thing for him and not really being a
that didn't come in the NBA
thing in the NBA.
Well, 79, yeah.
Yeah, if he would have had that for his career, it would have been very interesting. And not a lot of deep playoff runs for George. Only plays in 59 NBA playoff games. And in 78-79, he plays 14 games. They go to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's when they only had 2 rounds. And they win the first round 4-3 over Philadelphia. And then they lose to the Bullets in 7. And
those are that
was the furthest that he got. His kind of his best chance to win a championship. But yeah, he the thing you know about George Gervin is that finger roll that seemed to hit
totally
nothing but the bottom of the net.
No, that's why it's like it's one of those things like for kids coming up, like go YouTube that, like look that up, learn how to do something similar.
Extreme efficiency.
Yeah.
He was also like a big wing. Like he wasn't necessarily bulky, but he was 6'7" and just a prolific scorer, 4-time NBA scoring title winner, and had some monster seasons. And as we mentioned in the last episode, if you watched or listened, he had an epic scoring title win over David Thompson, where David Thompson goes for 73 points in the last season, thinks he has it locked. And then George Gervin scores 31 points in a quarter and ends up with 63 on the game for one of the most petty scoring titles in NBA history.
Yeah, but just to beat someone by decimals, like that's
pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a pretty
cool.
cool.
I wish there was more of that, like, you know, like David Robinson, like with I would say David Robinson's might be more petty.
Yeah, David Robinson versus Shaq was pretty. That was 0.5. It ended up at David Robinson's.
Oh man, yeah. Well, because he scored
71
points
against like the Clippers, which were like
Shaq had already played. That was the worst part. Like if Shaq had a chance to respond, instead they just like feed him and against like one of the worst teams in the league. And yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's what makes like like I agree. Like I miss scoring title races. Like I wish that was like a thing versus like try to stay healthy just for the playoffs and then let's go. But I digress.
Yeah. So we are now at number 7 on our list, and this was another player who just got buckets. I think a guy who would probably be like a really nice small ball 4 right now, or just I think he had the size for the 4 anyway. Certainly had wing skills and ridiculous athleticism and power, and that is the human highlight film, Dominique Wilkins.
Dominique put a shot.
Most well known of the Atlanta Hawks.
He put a shot he had he was a little more shooting later in his career when he was, I think, San Antonio and then Boston. He was kind of there, wasn't he in San Antonio like when David Robinson got hurt before they got Duncan? He was there for like a year or 2.
Yeah, he was there when they sucked.
Yeah, oh totally. They weren't good. But he was there. No,
he was there. No, he was there when I don't even know if he played with David Robinson. It was the year that David
Robinson was like out, but they needed like somebody to like put on the court so they could like go to other games and play other teams.
Yeah. And then he spends a year off in Greece, comes back for a little bit. But let's talk about the Golden Days.
But again, like Atlanta is obviously where everyone associates it and puts him in. Again, he runs
the epic slam dunk contests, and
just a powerful dunker. You know, super athletic there. But again, he runs into that unfortunate Eastern Conference era of like Boston was still super strong for the earlier part. Detroit.
Yeah.
And then of course once you
then eventually, you got Chicago.
Yeah, and then Michael Jordan, like. It's just that unfortunate thing. Like, okay, some of these dudes are great players that aren't going to win. But he was up there in scoring for, Did he have any seasons over 30 a game? I think he had.
He had at least one where he led the league in scoring.
Yeah,
that was 85-86 when Mike got hurt, and then he had 30.7 points per game in 87-88. And over his 12 years with Atlanta, averages 26.4 points per game. 2.6 assists, 6.9 rebounds.
And when you talk about scoring 30 points a game too, it's like you're talking in an era too. It's like the 3-point shot was there, but people weren't.
Yeah,
that wasn't the strategy of the like the main point of the game. So it's like these guys were grinding and really getting just really having to do a lot to get those numbers.
He's 31.9% 3-point shooter. Took 2,231 for his career. Still wasn't a preeminent facet of his game. In Boston, in 94-95, he makes 112 for 289 when he's 35 years old, shooting 38.8% from 3. Had another year, his last full season in Atlanta, he makes 120 for 316, so 38%. He was 33. So near the end is when he really started to take some 3-pointers, and you have to wonder what he would have done if that was introduced earlier And
Yeah,
he was more of a factor
more of a
in
thing.
the
Yeah.
NBA when he was playing, because I think he would have just been like so athletic and explosive in a huge mismatch at the four in the modern day.
Oh, totally. Like I think the way he runs the court, I mean, that would definitely cause that.
Just also like the speed and athleticism, and he was so strong.
Yeah, that was his biggest thing was the strength, you know. But
he had some great matchups.
And he also never really got as much luck with, like, he didn't really have as much complementary.
Yeah, that's the big factor, I think.
Too, like, he very much carried those Atlanta teams.
Like when the NBA came out with the NBA 50, I'm not even sure that Neek made the list.
No, I don't think he made it.
And I think he's like, it seems like he's more appreciated now. Just his like final statistics, he ended up almost 25 points per game for his career. Just a guy who was an absolute bucket. It would have been great to see him absolutely destroy Bobby Axelrod in the episode of Billions this season, where they're for some reason playing basketball.
I didn't quite.
It seems like he's giving Axe like way too much of a cushion.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because he's not a New York guy, but I was like, okay.
I mean, if you're a billionaire like and can play against Dominique Wilkins, like you do it.
I would do it. Yeah, I'd play against Bobby Hurley. Like I'm not the beggars can't be choosers. Like, but
you're a better man than I. For that.
I think Dominique Wilkins again. He's also Dream Team. Another one of those guys. He kind of like he didn't make the Dream Team.
Oh yeah, he was close. He was Dream Team 2.
He was on Dream Team 2. Yeah, that's why it's Dream Team 2. So he's just like that.
Dream Team 3?
I don't think so.
Didn't do 3. D3 was the worst movie anyway.
Yeah, but like, so he's just on that next level of dudes down. But when you look back at it, like, scoring like crazy. But yeah, that was, I mean, tough Eastern Conference era.
Also went to College of Georgia.
Yeah.
Drafted by Atlanta. Represents. So yeah, let's go on to number 6. This was a player who many felt they should just rig a lottery for. And you only know, you wonder if that happened or not.
It totally happened.
We also have a hypothetical of him coming out that year before and maybe going to Portland or
that would have been nice. The Blazers would have liked it. It would have been
better.
Yeah.
Would have been better. He gets hurt his rookie year anyway, but you know what? He played his senior year in college and ends up losing the national championship to Villanova in a game they played perfectly to beat an absolute juggernaut. And we are talking about Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing, who was one of the more dominant centers during the mid to late 80s, early 90s, even getting into the late 90s. He had a long, successful career, came really close to winning a championship.
Super close.
And unlike in college when he played Hakeem Olajuwon in the 1984 NCAA tournament, he came out on the losing end. So he won in 1984, Georgetown against Houston, an amazing matchup between two future first picks in the draft.
Back-to-back first picks.
Back-to-back. And then in 1994, they play each other. Hakeem gets the W.
But like
and Hakeem also, if you go by the all-time rankings, ends up being quite a bit ahead of Patrick Ewing.
Well,
so I know, at least from what I've heard, and this is just from listening to artifacts of history, people felt like Patrick Ewing was going to be like Bill Russell. Like, you put Patrick Ewing in the NBA, and he was going to be the leader of championship teams. Incredibly talented center. He was a tremendous rim protector and also had the ability to face up. They didn't take a lot of three-pointers back then, but like he had a really deadly jump shot
He
for
was like
a
a good
big
mid,
man
yeah,
at
he was
that
like the
time.
first like mid-range five that was like kind
Yeah.
of shooting with his face to the basket.
And also great in the post too. But
Yeah.
yeah, some felt like he took too many mid-range shots. Nowadays, I think it would fit really well. You probably would have him maybe going off of motion a little bit, but he was just so good in the post as well that, you know, that it seemed like whatever they were doing, they usually were doing the right thing. And he didn't necessarily have the greatest supporting cast at times and led teams to be quite a bit better.
Not
Yeah,
again.
in 93, 94, he definitely has the closest call and leads the playoffs in rebounding, leads in turnovers too. But he had a really good playoffs that year and had some other good years as well. So years where they came up just short to the Bulls. And year when they beat the Bulls was 94. And yeah, just a great career. Maybe not exactly what people thought he was going to be, which is why he's 6 instead of maybe, you know, like 3-1. But yeah,
Perennial all-star. He did make the
for
dream
sure.
team. You know, like I gotta say, like if I was the Knicks, I would have rigged the lottery for him too. Like, I mean, I think you can't
Yeah.
fault the guy that's like the staple of your franchise for a decade plus that people still.
In hindsight, you might have rigged the lottery for the guy, a guy who we'll talk about later on this list. But hindsight is 2020, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what you know at the time, and that's like that. Ewing was that dude.
He was
Yeah,
a great player.
I think he's one of those guys who would fit in so well today in the
Yeah,
NBA.
yeah, I think he would be a tremendous center today.
And he was looking a
And
little ahead of himself, but just I mean,
yeah,
just a great center. I mean, Michael Jordan, they've been friends since high school, and Michael Jordan liked to beat him then, and he beat him in college, and beat him like
yeah,
he just had that unfortunate.
yeah,
Patrick Ewing seems like a nice enough guy, but yeah, I think like those Knicks teams were like, yeah, there were a lot of like secondary guys that were good. He never had another full out dude to go with him. He had Oakley kind of as an enforcer type.
yeah. Well, and he was right at the end of his rope as soon as and he ended up just being hurt and staying out the rest of the playoffs when they went to the finals in 98, 99.
Yeah, 98, 99. Yeah, and then after
That was when Marcus Camby really stepped up. But yeah, they had a hell of a team. Like
that team they had like that was like
Sprewell,
Sprewell, Allen Houston.
Houston, yeah. So yeah, he had quite a bit of firepower. Didn't do great during the regular season, and Pat missed some time there. And I think he had a kind of a hell of a time as the leader of the players union as well, and said some things that I guess we'll leave out. But if you want to look it up, he didn't necessarily do the greatest job of making the players
he has the unfortunate thing.
Even though I am on the side of the players in most things. But,
and then he has the unfortunate thing of like, again, like a lot of guys get to go chase the rings, and then he ends up in like Seattle and then like Orlando, and Orlando is like really not.
He was chasing a few more dollars.
Yeah, like it's one of those kind of unfortunate things of like, like teams that had no chance, not even like playoff contending teams, and you can kind of like hope to. It was like
he didn't go full Vince Carter, but he went like semi.
He was pretty close. Yeah, he was even close.
Yeah, if you look through most of history, you will see a lot of players who have this long tenure with one team will go out and play a couple years with somebody
else.
You'll just usually generally forget that ever happened.
And I'll have to say, though, they're all deep cuts in the throwback jersey community. Like, if you have an Akeem Olajuwon Toronto Raptors jersey.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Much respect to you, sir, or madam. Like, much respect.
So, we have come to number 5 on our list. And this was the player we talked about last week. Allen Iverson. And the answer was so much fun to watch.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Had some nice playoff runs as well. As we talked about last week, didn't have the easiest transition to playing that bench role or playing the, kind of Lou Williams scorer off the bench.
Yeah, like that Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams,
Yeah.
like
Like really needed the offense to be around him. And that wasn't easy for him. I think injuries certainly played a part as well, and there were
because that changed like a guy like
a number of factors.
His style quickly, and again, he's not like a spot up shooter. He's a guy that really kind of needs to get the ball. He needs to get involved a lot. Can't just
Well, he was really good. He was really good playing off the ball as well, just because he was so fast going around screens off the cuts.
He plays off the ball so he can get it back, so he can shoot it.
Yeah. Well, he certainly needed shots.
Yeah.
How many shots per game did Allen Iverson average for his career? 21.8.
Yeah, it's like he's
That's
one of those role guys. It's like you got to realize like the ball's not coming to you this time down the court. It might not come to you the next time. Whereas like Allen Iverson's running that hard because he expects to get the ball. But yeah, I think like Terrell, just wasn't surrounded with the greatest team. I mean, Denver, when he got there, I mean, he and Melo, but that was, a deep Western Conference. Like there's really no potential there. I think when he gets to Detroit, I mean, Detroit's still not, because like he got traded for Billups.
Well, I think at that point we also realized that Detroit had made a mistake.
Oh, huge mistake. I would have never traded Chauncey Billups.
Yeah.
But from that team,
they wanted to shake things up, and I think Chauncey wanted to shake things up as well.
Chauncey wanted to go back home, back to Colorado. Like I kind of get that, but it's like that was
Chauncey Billups at that point was a much better player than Allen Iverson.
Yeah, and I think that Detroit run had run its course by the time he got there.
Sometimes you're looking for that guy who used to be great, and if he changes his situation, maybe he'll get back to that point. It didn't turn out in this case. Even with Denver, I think it was Melo and Iverson never really flowed that well together.
They didn't flow.
As fun as it may have been, it wasn't overly effective. And then, Chauncey goes there and they make it to the conference finals.
Because I think Chauncey, Mr. Big Shit, he's a more stout playoff type guy, whereas Allen Iverson, again, he's a little streakier, so that's why like game 1 against the Lakers,
you need the proper infrastructure around Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
He was so damn talented and a great scorer. He 4-time NBA scoring champion, and I was just looking at that. So the season he wins MVP, he's taking 25.5 shots per game. The next season, he's taking 27.8 shots per game.
Yeah, you need some guys
scoring almost the same amount, but they lose in the first round.
Some dudes that can rebound. I mean, yeah, just not an easy way to win in the NBA when you're taking and not making. I mean,
over his career in the playoffs, averages almost 30 points per game.
I mean, a lot of heart on that guy. I mean, but yeah, it just wasn't.
Yeah. 2002, 2003, they lose to the Pistons. So yeah, his real deep run was 2000, 2001, his MVP year, when they had the best team around him that he ends up having. And he has that magical game 1 of the NBA Finals. Has some great moments before that as well. Like against Toronto, he has I think duo 50-point games. That
was a series that came down to the last shot. He's missed the shot, but
So against Toronto in game 2 has 54. In game 5 has 52. A game that Philly wins by 33. Jesus.
When it rains, it certainly pours out there.
Yeah.
Allen Iverson's one of those, I think for him, it's such a cultural impact on the game. But he was the quickest guy on the court for several years during his early days. I mean, was getting up. I mean, was dunking.
Oh man, yeah. He could finish close. Like he had a number of ways to score, and like I think he would have taken many more threes now, and was so fast off ball. Like you remember doing the Iverson cuts and just like getting that space, and had so many ways to create space and get shots. As many bad shots as he took, he at least could get like a look at the basket. And he was a guy that on most of his teams, they depended heavily on him. It was like almost like a Damian Lillard now, where they depend on him to take like these otherworldly shots. And he would make some of them at like an amazing rate at times. He was very streaky. And, you look at his efficiency now, and that's why he's at this point on the list. But yeah, he had a number of great seasons.
He had
just his impact overall.
Yeah, he never really in Philly. He really never had anyone to take the offensive pressure off of him. He didn't have the ability to have an off scoring night where he was going to facilitate a little bit.
He was such a creative ball handler as well. Like I remember practicing my Iverson crossovers. Like they had in those Reebok commercials for. Oh,
it's a huge. Yeah, he's a huge YouTube mixtape guy right now. Like if you want to watch somebody.
Allen Iverson, pound for pound greatness and a tremendous career. We move on to the next player. I got some flack for having this guy on the list last week. I'm standing by it. It seems like most of the people who I ask who should be on the list, they don't have the best answer for me, or at least not an answer I would accept. I was talking with a friend right before this, and he was saying that David Robinson over Steve Nash, like, not happening. That's just not happening. Yeah, if you want Steve Nash off of the 10 worst MVP careers, give me a player who should be in his place, and I will take it into consideration. But he's still a tremendous player. And he never made an NBA Finals, as we mentioned last week. But over his career, averages 14.3 points per game, 8.5 assists per game, has a run over, like, it took him a while. He doesn't average double figures until he's 26 years old.
Well, because those early years.
From the time he was 26 until he's 36, he averages 16.6 points per game, 9.8 assists per game. Ridiculous shooting as well, like 43.4%.
He's an awesome shooter. Yeah, I think
90.9% from the line.
I think he really built that culture in Dallas.
Yeah,
with Dirk, but unfortunately he went to Phoenix where he had great years, but that's when Dirk, and Dallas eventually. So it's like he kind of was in the wrong time. But those Phoenix teams were so exciting; they were scoring tons of points a game, but unfortunately they were also giving up tons plus one more points a game.
Yeah,
that's simply like this fast pace, like that high pick and roll with Hinamare was definitely something. You had Sean Marion, like it was very, very interesting. He wins those two MVPs, but could never get it done in the playoffs. I remember some tough series against the Lakers.
Indeed,
with Kobe, he versus Kobe would be a thing. I mean, he kind of chased that. He did that one chase season where he went to the Lakers. And you had Kobe, Powell, Dwight, Steve Nash.
Yeah.
Nash gets hurt.
I think at that point he just
Nash pretty much doesn't play.
Yeah.
I think Kobe got hurt. It was like that season just ended up in like terrible for everybody. But Dwight's back on the Lakers.
It looked a lot better on paper than it actually turned out to be.
Like it's a very good video game team, to play like in a simulation to put like, I can get Nash and Howard and do all this stuff, but yeah, that team kind of fell apart. And then Phoenix just never had the defensive, in a slower game, the defensive prowess to really lock down the game.
Yeah. So he makes the conference finals a few times.
With Dallas or with Phoenix?
He made it once with Dallas and a couple times with Phoenix. Or no, 3 times with Phoenix. Yeah. So he has a number of good years there. And the thing I was talking about also, I had a friend telling me how Steve Nash totally deserved the MVP in 2005, 2006. I'll give a legitimate beef as to why Phoenix looks so much better that year and them making the conference finals that year. So they beat both the LA teams in 7-game series. They do win. They take Dallas to 6, and Steve Nash plays amazing basketball there as well. But there was this really strange rule. I don't know if you remember this, where the 3 divisions had to be the top 3 seeds.
Oh yeah, I remember that was the thing. Yeah.
Jeez. Phoenix wins 54 games. Dallas wins 60. San Antonio wins 63. Dallas is a 4 seed. What? Like, how? I'm so glad they ended up changing that rule.
Yeah, that was pretty. Yeah,
because you had to, like, everybody was looking forward to San Antonio, Dallas, and that series was amazing. The second round series that year of Dallas against San Antonio, that went to 7 games, and yeah, it was a crazy finish to that game. I remember like Timmy getting like fouled and they didn't call it, and there was a whole thing, and that whole foul call travesty, that was a conference finals foul call travesty. I don't know if that was a second round foul call travesty, all right? But the NBA at the time makes Phoenix maybe look a little bit better by not having to play Dallas or San Antonio in the second round.
That would help.
Yeah. Exactly.
Again, like I think, yeah, Nash is also. I mean, Western Conference has been strong for a long time now. You know, like, and
he
so
did play in a really strong conference, and there's absolutely no question of his incredible value over a huge number of years.
Oh my God! Like, and that's the thing. Like both teams, like Phoenix early in his career. I mean, he was kind of under Jason Kidd, but then he goes to Dallas, comes into his own, builds up that kind of winning culture that Dallas hadn't had in a long time.
Yeah, the guy was like an offensive mastermind. He was such a deadly shooter. He should have shot more. Like that's the honest thing with Steve Nash, because he could create as well. Like, he wasn't where obviously he could create. You know, he was averaging like near double-digit assists like the entire time.
He's such a great facilitator.
Second time in Phoenix.
He had a great, like, what was his free throw percentage? Because he was a great free throw.
Oh, he was near the 90s. From that period, from when he's 26 to 36, it was 90.9.
Yeah, like, imagine him
getting, shooting 43% from 3. For his career, what's he have for his career? He's 42.6%. Like, he's a guy that you want taking, like, at least, 8 or 9 threes per game. And I doubt he had a season where he finishes even close to there. Yeah. Like, he really didn't, man.
No, he
didn't even have a season where he took 5 threes per game. Like, that's crazy.
He's a definition of he's a definition of what you want in a point guard. Just
he was so unselfish. Yeah.
Well, he'd do that kind of like almost like a hockey thing. No, that's racist for saying that. But he'd like go under the basket. He'd do that, like go under the basket, like
the soccer thing with Steve Nash. You know that.
Yeah, he's a soccer guy. And obviously, like for us, Canada, he helped put Canada basketball in the.
Oh, that is a good reminder, because I wanted to bring up Steve Nash's Olympic play. Thank you, Basketball Reference, as always. And it shows the 2000 Olympics. He averages 13.7 points per game, 6.9 assists, 4.1 turnovers, but the amount he was asked to do on that team. He does only have 1 steal in 7 games, but 4 blocks. Let's go, Steve Nash.
Yeah, that's big for him.
Including 2 blocks in the game against France in the quarterfinals. They unfortunately lose that quarterfinal game because they were playing really, really well. They lose twice. They lose to Russia and they lose to France. Steve Nash has some huge games. Against, I guess it was what was the team called? I don't want to get this wrong. Serbia and Montenegro at the time. Steve Nash, in an 83-75 win, goes for 26 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. Yeah, Steve Nash was a killer in the Olympics in Australia. Canada doesn't finish as high as they would have hoped. They don't win a medal because they lose in the quarterfinals to eventual silver medalist France. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight how great Steve Nash was playing for Team Canada and playing in the 2000 Olympics, which, as we have said many times on Viseland, is the last time Canada has made the Olympics.
Yeah.
We're hoping for 2021.
2021, let's do it. It's an odd year, but odd things can happen in odd years.
None odder than Canada getting back in there. No, I'm just kidding.
It should happen, but like it'd be more
We
odd.
hope. Come on.
I think it'd be more odd if
Let's get together, guys.
If all the dudes show up. That would be the odd thing for Canada.
That's what we're
all
hoping.
the dudes actually show up, but
that's what we're hoping. But as of late, has been an odd thing. Now, the same friend who shall remain nameless
but
once asked me who I liked between Steve Nash and John Stockton. I say John Stockton. My reason, John Stockton, incredibly similar to Steve Nash with that defensive kick. And the thing with Stockton's defense is he was just such a pest. He had 2 seasons where he led the NBA in steals, 3 where he averaged 3 steals per game. The guy was just, he was annoying. He was another guy who absolutely could have shot more. Doesn't shoot as well as Steve Nash, but like still, given the time, a really, really good shooter. Ends up at 38.4% for his career. 82.6 from the line. So he's not quite the shooter as Steve Nash, but certainly like another guy who was actually provided defense. So like, you know, you couldn't take nights off against John Stockton. And he also had these like insane assist numbers. And
career leader in assists.
Yeah. Oh, well, not only career leader in assists, like career leader in assists by like 4,000. Like,
yeah.
It's not even close. Like his steals and assist numbers are otherworldly.
No, I know. He passed Magic and he kept going. Like
yeah. Man. Oh yeah. Well, in his longevity, gosh, even his last year, he plays 82 games at 40 years old.
Yeah.
And
good shooter and again he you know, they had the simple things going on in that Utah team. It was like pick and roll and give and go, and they worked it so well. He and Malone.
And let's go from when Stockton was 25 to when Stockton was 35, over 880 game stretch. Averages 15.3 points per game, 2.5 steals per game, 12.5 assists per game, and 35.7 minutes per game. The guy
frustrating defender and apparently also one of the greatest trash talkers.
Yeah.
In the underrated trash talkers. Like just because
he was a great screener. He would like hold you on screens. He was like fighting tooth and nail.
Just because they don't give you the TV time for being a trash talker doesn't mean you're not a trash talker.
Yeah. And yes, Utah during those early years, they get knocked out early and often. But then they have a 3-year stretch where they are either making conference finals and then 2 years where they're making the NBA finals from 95, 96 to 97, 98.
And then obviously, you know, like Jordan in the finals, like that kind of sucks. But you know what? Stockton played his whole career in Utah there. Didn't go chasing.
Yeah. No, he finished it out, and then Karl Malone left.
Yeah, I think Karl Malone's like
Karl Malone tried to chase that last one.
Yeah. But
looks good at the time.
Yeah. So yeah, Stockton is one of those, you know, like I think if we were to, you know, talk he versus Nash, and again it comes down to that steals number. That's really but very similar games between both. Great facilitators, good shooters. I think Nash is probably a little bit better shooter.
He was.
But again, if I had to have either one of them is going to show up on my team as a point guard, I'd be happy either way.
Yeah. It just seemed like Stockton, in so many instances, also like would just school young point guards too.
Oh, totally.
He was a guy who was merciless.
No, totally. Very, very ruthless aggression.
Yeah. 10-time All-Star.
On the court.
He made his first All-Star game at 26, and his last. What amazing he didn't make it at 25 because he averaged 13.8 assists per game that year. What was Utah's record? They were 47 and 35. Like, give the guy an All-Star game. Jesus.
Well, that record gets you into the playoffs like with these.
They make the second round. Like, God.
We talked about it.
Mark Eaton made that goddamn team that year.
Mark Eaton made an All-Star team.
Oh my God. Wait, 1 second. I need to see this. Was that the year? No, okay, he makes it that next year, and Stockton makes it too.
Okay. Then they had 3 All-Stars.
That would have been just brutal.
Kind of sad too, but
yeah.
But yeah, no,
Stockton has like this huge stretch where he leads the NBA in assists and averages like 1 year like 14.5, next year 14.2. Gosh.
Yeah, that's
the guy was so good.
That's awesome. You know, he makes the dream team.
Makes the dream team, well deserved, and makes Carl with his ability to just be able to walk through without people noticing. And then his son played in the Les Schwab Invitational a couple years ago. John Stockton not even sitting courtside. Like, he's sitting just in the stands. And honestly, I felt like I was the only person that knew that was John Stockton.
I feel like he flies.
I'm like, that's like one of the greatest basketball players of all time right there. And nobody was bothering him.
I feel like he flies.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You had Scottie Pippen and Kenyon Martin's sons playing for Sierra Canyon. They're sitting courtside. Like, everybody knows who they are. John Stockton, it seems like nobody really knows. But yeah, we know.
Yeah, and you go to Spokane, everybody knows.
Yeah, as they should. But yeah, one of the all-time greats. Never won a ring. Now down to the final 2. I think if you follow basketball closely, yeah, the dream team has been a theme with the last few players, it seems. These 2 guys were on the dream.
That's how you know it's getting the serious part where we get rid of the dream team 2 people and we get to the dream team people.
And yeah. Chuck was on 96 also.
Yes.
I think. Yeah. So that was 3.
But those are Olympics.
You're correct in separating you're separating D2 from D3.
Yeah.
As we all should.
The Olympics are different. The World Championships was Dream Team 2.
Yeah. I'm more talking about the Mighty Ducks movies. But that's a whole nother topic. We can break down Hans versus Jan later.
You can actually check out the article. It's on my website, Jay Visenberg.
It is on Jason's website, and he is a Hansian bastard.
I'm a thought leader in the Mighty Ducks space. But yeah, so we're talking Charles Barkley, the most.
We're talking about the NBA version of Hans versus Jan, if you will. Charles Barkley versus Karl Malone. People lean in very different camps on the subject. I lean with Karl Malone. So it's just longevity. And the other thing I want to bring up, it's not like fair necessarily, but head-to-head matchups, it's pretty close. But Malone 23-16 in the regular season. They're around the same age. Actually, Karl Malone is 155 days older than Charles Barkley. For those that said, Charles needs like a little more time. Charles actually enters the NBA before Karl Malone. And in the playoffs, Malone goes 6-4. They don't play each other until Barkley's with Houston, so it's hard to count that. And then in one, he got hurt.
So just to clarify, for everybody, number 2, we're going with Charles Barkley.
Yes. So yeah.
Number 1,
Karl Malone.
Karl Malone.
Yes.
So we'll talk Charles.
We're starting with Charles.
Yeah, Charles. Like, I mean,
round mound and rebound.
Round mound rebound. Obviously not happy in Philadelphia with the situation. Pieces out, gets that trade to Phoenix, wins the MVP. They come close with Michael Jordan. That's his only finals appearance in 93. Really, after that, Phoenix was going to be a contending team, but then Hakeem Olajuwon obviously dominates those next 2 years. I remember that Sports Illustrated cover with Horace Grant and Charles Barkley, and it's looking through Horace Grant's goggles, and it's like Barkley to Grant, see you in the finals.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Goes to Houston.
That's what you thought.
You have this Houston team towards the end where it's like, again, it's a great like simulation team where you're like, oh, I have Olajuwon and Barkley, and Clyde was there for a bit, and then I think after Clyde goes, Scottie Pippen, Barkley. Yeah, Scottie, Barkley, Olajuwon, like, which obviously never materializes, and then Barkley gets hurt in Houston, kind of fades there.
So in 96-97, Karl Malone and Charles Barkley play in the Western Conference Finals. Karl Malone averages 23.5 points per game, 11.5 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists per game, steal and a block. Charles Barkley, 16.2, 11, 3.8, and the Houston Rockets lose in 6. That was with Hakeem, Clyde, and Charles. To get Barkley, they gave up a lot of their young infrastructure. So that was one thing where they didn't have a ton of depth. But they had these 3, Hall of Fame players.
Great.
All quite old at that point.
Yeah, they were all sort of a little past.
All past their prime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hakeem still in that series averages 27.2 points per game. Like, it was definitely his team. But, yeah, they just it seemed like Utah had a little bit more off the bench.
Yeah, I think they had, like, Shannon Anderson.
Yeah.
They had
Jeff Hornacek.
Yeah, Hornacek, Brian Russell. I mean, they were a little bit better team. I think when it comes to Malone versus Barkley, I just look at like Malone's peak years were so high. Like when he was MVP, he was so strong.
Oh yeah.
Pick and roll game with Stockton. I mean, there's a while like he was. I mean, obviously pissed off Michael Jordan, but Karl Malone did win those MVPs.
For sure. Yeah. Well, Charles wins MVP first,
but
then he has like his peak years with Phoenix are excellent.
Oh, totally. Which were earlier.
They were really good teams too.
I think Malone's I think Malone, and pretty much Malone scores 2,000 points like every year in his career, except I think his first and last.
First 2, and then his last few.
Yeah.
He has a number of years.
But he was pretty high on the all-time, the NBA all-time leading scorers, and he was really
second. Yeah. Karl Malone is second in NBA all-time leading scorers. For his career, Charles averaged 22.1 points per game, 11.7 rebounds, 3.9 assists. Like, if you wanted to, there's a reason we compare Charles Barkley and Zion Williamson so much, in that they're like 6'6". Some people say Zion's 6'7". If you want to give him that, sure. He pretty much is, because with that strength and athleticism, it's just insane. And Charles was another guy. He was maybe 6'6". I'm guessing had like a +4 or 5 wingspan. That's just my guess. But like his height didn't matter. He's still one of the best power forwards of all time, and was so damn dominant.
Ferocious.
Had a number of seasons where he was one of the best players in the league. And he certainly like was one of the most marketable and exciting players in the league. And how many times does he make all NBA first team? A number. Yeah. 5-time all NBA first team. But then you go Malone, and I'm sure it's even more. And Malone's MVP shares as well. Yeah. Malone. Yeah. Like a long run.
It's that nitty gritty tough call. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, I just think like Malone, and again, like that give and go, like he's a good passer out of the post, but also that the pick and roll, so simple yet so well done between he and John Stockton.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's
Like
just,
if you're talking about a guy who, like with Karl Malone, the one guy you could probably like compare his body to as far as just being incredibly strong, agile. He's not the same level of like run jump athlete, but he was so good at that as well. Like LeBron. Like LeBron is like Karl Malone if he was even more agile. And like then the other thing with Karl Malone is his shot was so soft. Like for a guy that strong, he just seemed to have this
surprisingly
amazing
good
touch.
I think Barkley was probably a little more shooting range.
Yeah. I would say Barkley would be a better shooter, but Malone would be a better scorer.
Yeah. The Malone like had a lot more of that. And again, like that's what he was doing in those key years in Utah later. Like he was really.
And then defender you give to Malone as well.
Even
though Charles was no slouch there as well.
I mean, because like that's why Barkley's a rebound guy, but like Malone also was just so solid. Yeah. It's just Barkley. His last
Malone got a lot of rebounds also.
Barkley's last year in Houston was pretty much injury. Malone has that unfortunate last year with the Lakers where he goes to chase the ring.
How unfortunate was it?
He
made the NBA Finals, Jason.
It's just weird to see him in a Lakers jersey, and like it was a year where like Kobe.
Well, it was hilarious to see him in a Lakers jersey, and I'll tell you why. Because he had been crying his face off about Kobe calling off a screen in an All-Star game against Michael Jordan, and saying all this cryptic stuff about these young players nowadays, and then it turned out it didn't really matter. The other hilarious thing about Karl Malone is like he has these like insane scoring games, and I remember seeing one game on NBA TV where he was, I think, upset about not being chosen as an all-star starter when he more than likely deserved to. But who cares? He was chosen as an all-star. And I guess he was thinking of sitting out the game. And like he has this amazing game right before the all-star game. And he gets on the microphone and he's like, I'll play the game anyway. Okay, fine. It's like, geez, man.
He might have been a bit of a diva.
Get a grip.
Yeah. It might have been a little dramatic, but I mean.
Like Michael Jordan was not the only one who like made all of these things to motivate himself.
Oh, of course. I think a lot of these great players are also like relative sociopaths, but yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not more than Karl Malone.
Yeah, that was that was the last hurrah of the Lakers because obviously then Shaq goes after Malone retires, Peyton moves on, and then Shaq also gets traded.
It was the last hurrah for those Lakers.
For the Lakers, yeah. So I mean. And again, if you have a Karl Malone Lakers jersey, deep cut, more power to you.
That is a definite deep cut.
Because 90% of people are going to be like, why would you do this? So let's run through some.
Maybe a Karl Malone Heat jersey if he just felt like coming back and trying to get that ring. Yeah. But then he wouldn't have been on the list.
Let's run through.
Yeah, these two guys, two of the best power forwards of all time. They're really close to each other. And then the one thing I'll give Charles Barkley over Karl Malone, if you watch those Dream Team documentaries and everything like that, like the 92 Olympics was like Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley. Like
totally. Charles Barkley's the leading scorer.
Karl Malone wasn't a guy you were talking about as much as those two other guys.
I mean, again, Charles Barkley comes out of that Olympics into his MVP season.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just him rolling into it. Yeah. But
Karl Malone comes out of that season. He's like averaging very similar numbers also. They're big time. And just the longevity of Karl Malone. And I gave that the edge. Prime, you could say Karl Malone, but they're really similar. And I think that's a really good topic to have, because I almost think that people that look at analytics and maybe some other things, they might take Charles Barkley over Karl Malone. So yeah, that would be a good topic to have for a Viseland poll. And we recently had a Viseland poll. This is an age-old question.
Check our Twitter at Viseland.
Yeah, check the Viseland Twitter. I didn't come up with this, but like it's something that it's like how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Like, are there aliens in Roswell? Like all these things. Who slams harder, Onyx or Vince Carter? The song is apparently answered, or the question is answered in the song "Slam Harder," but by a party that we feel is pretty biased.
Yeah, they're making this up. So let us know. Come to our Twitter at Viseland, vote in the poll. We're gonna put up another poll. We'll put another poll when this episode goes up for Barkley versus Malone. So who would you take? And then do we have any honorable mentions of dudes that you thought were close to this list?
That is a very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. I do. Let's go with Vince Carter.
Yeah, 22 years in the NBA.
My answer for who slammeth hardest.
And also, the funny thing about Vince, we'll just touch quickly on it, is 22 years, no rings. Also, didn't go chasing the rings. Really chased a lot of lottery teams.
I don't know if he could have.
Yeah, he was on Sacramento. He was like.
I think he wanted to play too.
He played. And, he spent the last 2 years on Atlanta, who were pretty dreadful. But much love to Vince.
Definitely love to Vince. If people can't see, I've been tending to wear shirts that at least semi-correspond with our topic. And I'm wearing my Raptors champion shirt from last year. And yeah, big shout out to Vince Carter.
I would have loved to see Vince be like the 10th man on that team. But, he got to play more in situations. Yeah. Still a great career.
The Richard Jefferson of the 2019 Raptors team, that would have been really cool. Alex English.
Great.
As I've mentioned, led the 1980s in scoring, was a big-time scorer as well. Had some years where he was an assistant coach with the Raptors.
Yeah.
Pete Maravich, who, as I was saying to Jason before this, he doesn't have a long playoff history. Like, in books about Pete, because he's such a fascinating player, and if you're talking about like a person who is an absolute like
watch his
with the ball in his hands, amazing passer, like crazy scoring touch and like ability. He is practicing doing all these dribble moves, and his father Press brings in John Wooden to watch him do dribble moves, and he says, "Why don't you work on defensive footwork with him and try and get him advanced in that facet?" And Press says, "Well, with his like offensive ability, I don't think he'll even need it." And John Wooden says something that is probably devastating to a young child, but turns out to be relatively true. He'll be really good, but he'll never win a championship. And unfortunately, that ended up being the case with Pete.
Yeah, he ends up that 1 year on the Celtics, 79-80 Bird's rookie year, Celtics win next year. But definitely a legend.
Yeah,
probably
just need one more year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Pete, Bernard King, another big time scorer who just never ended up winning a chip, but was one of the most exciting players of the 80s and had some really good years in the early 90s as well. And finally, Bob Lanier, who is a center that doesn't really get talked about very much, but he was another person who had a fantastic NBA career, mostly with Detroit, and never ended up winning a ring. I will say, if you go back and look at some of the one-on-one contests, Bosnier ends up winning the one-on-one contest
Hey,
due to just ridiculous size and inability to stop Bosnier. But it would be really fascinating to see a modern day version of that. But I'm not sure that would be in the cards, and there would have to be so much that would go into it. But just a really cool concept, the fact that they ever had something like that, and players were willing to participate. NBA players.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, oh, I'm not getting paid. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. That could be part of it.
That's what I think of most of these guys.
Not wanting to be embarrassed, another part, and then needing fanfare. But remember, they almost had the thing we were all waiting for. This was after Hakeem had beat Shaquille O'Neal in the '95 NBA Finals. They were going to do a series of one-on-one. I think it was best 6 out of 11, and it would have been Shaq versus Hakeem Olajuwon, and they just could never get it together.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, I think that what people don't realize is how draining playing one-on-one.
Totally. And again, none of these dudes want to get embarrassed.
Yeah.
That's another subject for another time. But that was our list. If you guys got any people that you think were slept on or should be higher or that we forgot, let us know in the comments. We're also going to be putting up polls on Viseland. So Barkley, Malone, who you got. Definitely check us out and follow us at Viseland. If you have any suggestions or anything, you could always email us at viselandpod@gmail.com. Jason, Michael, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you new episodes every Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you so much for stopping by. Remember to rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends if they're basketball fans.
Tell your friends,
Love you, Viselanders. What were you saying?
Tell your friends.
Oh, those two. And thank you so much for your response. It's been really fun getting all of the comments on the list. So definitely feel free to comment. And we'll see you next week.
We will.